is. And what we're going to do today is we're going to continue talking about the brain, and then we're going to talk about the spinal cord. And then we're going to do a little quiz, and we're going to say, have a good evening. So we're not going to need to keep it too long. It's kind of nice pace. The school I do in Merced is like a 9-week course. We have each Zoom is a whole booklet. It's crazy. And so at least we don't have to worry about that. Let's see. Let me see if you guys can see. Can you guys see my, oh, where is this? My PowerPoint? Hello.
Yes.
Yeah, good. So when we look at the brain term list, we left off where we talked about the precentral gyrus and the postcentral gyrus, which was the discussions about the lobes before that. And where we're going to pick it up now is the cerebellum. And so when we look at the cerebellum in terms of identifying it, where is my cerebellum? Well, we could point it out many places. There we go. The cerebellum is the brain in the back. So this is the posterior aspect. So if you have to point out a brain, it's in the backside behind the brain stem area that we have here. And there's a lot going on at the cerebellum. It has a lot to do with balancing and also with planning and changing plans depending on what happens in the surrounding. So that's, but for the test, you just need to identify it. And then after the brain, after the cerebellum, we have the midbrain and the pons and the medulla. And so the midbrain area is right here in this area. And so I don't know where I have the picture for it. Or probably further down here, huh? No, let's just look at this. The midbrain. Well, if I actually do anything in the midbrain, I'm gonna look at the inferior and the superior colliculi if I identify structures, because I kind of like those structures because they're pretty identifiable. I mean, that's one thing. They're easily showable. They're right by the cerebellum, but they're also interesting because they harbor reflexes that make our head move. And so when we get an auditory reflex, some little noise on the outside and the periphery comes in and our head moves towards that area, that is happening in this inferior colliculus. And the same is true for the visual stimuli in the periphery from the superior colliculus. And so that's kind of, I think, kind of interesting. Oops. So those two structures are on the list too. I want you to know those. They're under medulla oblongata, the superior colliculi and the inferior colliculi. And so that's structures inside the midbrain that we have. And then after the midbrain, which goes across here, it's also this part. But then we have this area where there's a bulge here, and the bulge here in the front is where we have the pons. So the pons are passageways that go to the cerebellum and to the spine. So there's a lot of highway, a lot of axons and tracts and all that. And the pons is heavily, it has a lot of those because of the cerebellum. And so that's why we have a swelling here to accommodate for all of that. And then below that swelling, we have the medulla oblongata that comes out inferiorly here. And we look at the medulla oblongata. This is the medulla here. It's part of the brain. The whole thing from the midbrain here, as we exit sort of the main brain structure and go down towards the spinal cord, all of that is known as the brain stem. And when we look at the brain, this is sort of where the reactive brain is, where the salamander type brain is, where we have a lot of the unconscious respiratory centers and so forth in there. And the medulla, most of what the medulla is pathways going up and down the spine, or from the brain into the spine. We want to have one structure that we like here is the pyramids, and the pyramids are the connection. They're right here, these two strands going down, they call those the pyramids, because these are, and see down in here, they call it the decussation. This is where fibers cross, and these fibers are directly originating from the precentral gyrus that we talked about, and they go down into the spine, deep spine, and then they travel down the spinal cord, going through the medulla here in the pyramids as pyramids. And they're actually called pyramids not because of these strand looking things, but because the cells that they originate, the cell bodies of those cells, are located in the precentral gyrus, and they look like upside down triangles. And so that's kind of where that word comes from. And then also in the brain stem, in the medulla, is the olives, the olivary nuclei. And the reason actually why I like those structures, because on the brain in school that's colored, they're actually looking green. So if you have a structure down in here that looks green, we could look at it on the brain when we do the quiz, that looks green, you know, we're looking at the olives. So that's an easy remembering thing. They don't look green in the real body. They just look green because they drew them green. And I think for us to remember, because they're olives, and olives can be green. So anyway, they have information that goes to muscles and joint stretch, and to the cerebellum. So they talk. It's about integration of muscle stuff and joint stuff. A lot that the brain actually does occupy itself with is the movement apparatus, because it's just such a big coordination piece. And so that's why in the spinal cord I kind of talk a little bit about some of those pathways, because that's kind of interesting to me, how we think of moving our body, and then how we have the different influences coming through the brain. So if you think about when you move, you execute a motion that you want to, like, let's say I want to go turn the light on and I need to stand up. I execute the motion in the precentral gyrus, in that motor part, and then I start getting up and start walking, and the walking is a rhythmic motion, and the rhythmic motion is the next structure we're actually going to talk about here, the basal ganglia. And you know, it's not even on the list. Is it on the list? I don't have it on the list. What's wrong with me? Oh, you know, it's not on the list because it's hard to identify. So anyway, but I'll huh? Go ahead. Oh, so I want to use it anyway to describe real quick the motion pattern. So we want to walk somewhere. Let's say turn on the light. We say like, oh, I want to get up and walk. That's in the precentral gyrus, in the frontal lobe, right on top here on the surface, and then the stimuli go internally towards the spinal cord, sort of in that direction, and they pass by what we know as the basal ganglia. And the basal ganglia has movement patterns, learned movement patterns stored in there. And so actually, as you start walking, you don't need to think about every step you take. You just need to start walking, and then the body does it on its own. And so that's what's happening in the basal ganglion. So that's why we can say, you know, when we have to practice for something, we say practice makes perfect, but practice makes actually permanent. And so if you learn those learned movement patterns wrong, you still learn them just that way. So that's one reason why it's good to learn things the right way at first, so you don't have to unlearn them first and then relearn them. So that's just a little bit of a thing there. And so then we walk, and let's say you've got a hole in a floor. Hopefully not, but if we have a hole in the floor, then we have these pathways go down through this area here, the spinal, the brainstem, and then they connect with the cerebellum, and the cerebellum can influence it and can say, like, the cerebellum is a balancing thing. So if you walk into a hole and you don't see it, and you're not going to fall down, but you would be falling down if you only have the basal ganglia, if you have your rhythmic motion of walking. What now happens is the cerebellum comes in and says, like, hey, we have a problem here. We almost fell. We need to counterbalance the muscles. and often what that does is you 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 adjust, so you stretch out the flexor and the extensors, and sort of that just kind of reflexively changes that you don't fall down. And so then that is done through the cerebellum, for example. And then from there, the motion, the nerves go down and innervate the muscles that they need to innervate. And then we contract and relax those muscles in rhythmic fashion if we walk. So that's kind of an interesting thing for me always with the brain, because it's kind of fairly well identified, I guess, and as we get into higher functions and thinking and that stuff, then it becomes much more complicated. From there now, though, I want to go to the diencephalon. So we talked about the back brain. My test took me so much longer. I couldn't look through these PowerPoints before I started teaching here today. But we talked about the cortex, the main area where we have all these lobes that we identified. Now we also had a little discussion about the brain stem. And now what's left is the diencephalon, that's sort of in between the cortex and the brain stem. And so let me see if you see thalamus, let me know. There we go. That was good. So the thalamus, I want you guys to identify on the test. And the thalamus is this egg-shaped structure here in the center of the brain, one on each side. And what the thalamus does is really cool. It is the gateway for all sensory pathways, except for smell. And so that's actually why I think lavender is really cool, because it bypasses, it goes right to the limbic system. Smell goes right to the reactive emotional brain, which makes sense, because when you look at the lower animals, you have to be able to sense things, not necessarily be able to see them, but maybe smell them. And so a lot of rodents have really well-developed olfactory pathways and reactions to them. And we also still have that smell goes straight to the emotional brain, and so we can have a reaction to the smells. So that's kind of interesting. It does bypass consciousness. And so what goes through the thalamus, though, goes towards the cortex. And when we say cortex, we think consciousness. We can think about it. And so all the energy, all the sensations that we get into the brain, except for smell, have to go through the thalamus, and will get sorted out in the thalamus and sent to the proper place, that then we have conscious interpretation of what this stimulus is, for example. So it's a very important structure. It's a lovely structure. Then the hypothalamus is, if you look, this is a side view onto one of the hemispheres. This is the thalamus here. The hypothalamus is a cluster of nuclei right below it, a little anterior below it. And those are amazing. Look at that. What that little piece of brain regulates body temperature, emotions, autonomic nervous system stuff. That's where we have the link between the nervous system and the adrenaline system. Like when you get the endocrine system, when you get adrenaline and anxiety. And God, I took a test. I would believe I was so nervous taking an anatomy test. I should know this stuff. But anyway, the guy shows a lot of slides, and I'm not into slides. But look, water balance, appetite, sleep, so a lot of stuff happens in the hypothalamus. So it's a very important structure, and it is the structure where we have the connection with that psychosomatic. The psyche influences the body. Soma means body. And so when people talk about psychosomatic, or people talk about, your blood pressure gets high long-term if you're always hyper excited and hyper anxious and all that sort of stuff. That's what we're talking about. That's the hypothalamus that works with all of that together. So that's a really important structure. And then below that, we have the pituitary gland, and I put this in the brain system, even though it's an endocrine structure, because, well, partly it's a neural structure, so I get away with it, but also it shows it on the brain, because it's right there by the brain, it's attached to the brain. All right, so when we have a couple more things there, we have the corpus callosum. So we've got to go back up to this. The corpus callosum is a connection structure from side to side. So when you look at the two hemispheres, this is actually a cool picture because these are all showing the pathways. And so you have a hemisphere here and a hemisphere here. And then these structures here that connected to, that's the corpus callosum. And you can see them right here, those wide, thick structures and bundles. Commissural fibers, and the main one is that corpus callosum. Yeah, if you have questions, just speak up. What else is there to be said about the corpus callosum? Well, they say it's not well developed in men and better developed in female brains, and they then associate that with the ability to multitask or not being able to multitask. Sorry, I got a dry throat here.
So that one, the corpus callosum, is the one that's connecting both sides, the fibers that are. Okay.
Yeah, it's the fibers. It's all axons, and you can kind of see the white stuff is usually axons, and it's because it's the myelin around it, the fatty stuff. So it's all of these here on the visual graphic. It goes all the way from back to front. It goes all the way here. The whole thing is the corpus callosum. Is the whole thing. It goes all along. This is just a cross section of it. You can see it here too. This is the corpus callosum right here. That thing right there. So it's a thick thing. It's a good, cool thing. Anyway, so that's that. And then the other structures we have there are the ventricles. And when I look at the ventricular system, I look at that's the inside the brain. Let me back up. Inside the brain, we have chambers, and those chambers are filled with fluid. And that fluid is cerebrospinal fluid, and that fluid helps us get nutrients to the brain and nourish it, and also helps us with making it weightless. The brain needs to be weightless for it not to collapse under gravity. And so that's because that fluid goes all the way around the brain. So we have a whole, the brain is sort of in water, so it's like swimming. But the one structures on the inside, those chambers that we want to identify, are the lateral ventricles. There's one on each side. Then we got a third ventricle right in between. And then we got a cerebral aqueduct, which goes up and down, or down towards the spinal cord. Gets a little thicker than in front of the cerebellum, and that's called the fourth ventricle there. And so that's that system. And then, you know, the cerebrospinal fluid gets made by the choroid plexus, which is on the floor of the lateral ventricles. It's the red stuff. When you pick up a model brain, it has some red things there. That's what that represents. And then it goes from there downward and out, squeezes out into the subarachnoid space a little bit here, but then it goes down the spinal cord.
So is the ventricle like a cavity where there's fluid?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
It's a space.
Okay.
That has, let me see if I can, it's a space. Yeah, I'm going to pull that thing up. Like on the model, it's like, why don't the pieces fit together kind of moment, you know, and it's a space that gets created. Let me see if I have a picture here.
Yeah, because I was just trying to understand what the heck we're talking about here, because it doesn't
Yeah.
ventricle. So I was kind of thinking about a blood vessel. So like a space where there's fluid.
Yeah. Look here. I got this here. Hold on. No, wait. What am I doing? Sharing the same thing again. I want to share a Safari. See this here on the model? That's that. You see the model, right?
Oh, that's the empty space.
Yeah, the empty space is a ventricle. So that's the corpus callosum. We might as well just go through it on here, actually. That's the corpus callosum. That's a thalamus. That's the hypothalamus. That's a pituitary gland. It usually it has a little thing coming off of it. So, but you know, it will break off. So they just attach it right to it. So it has a stalk that comes down. And then this is actually the optic chiasm here, that the optic nerves come, the eyeballs are right here, and they go back, and then the optic nerve goes through this chiasm. And half of the nerves will cross over. We're going to talk about that next week, or that's for next week. And then here you could see the fourth ventricle. You could see that space also. And this narrow little thing from the thalamus area, actually, because the third ventricle is right in between the thalami, which is kind of nice because that it can nourish the thalamus real well. And that's that little narrow groove here is the cerebral aqueduct. Then this is the cerebellum, and the bumps above the cerebellum are the superior and the inferior colliculi. And then this here is that choroid plexus that makes the cerebrospinal fluid, this little, we don't have that on the list, but this little strip of pink. Then here's the pons, and then here's the medulla oblongata down here. Let's see if we're here. We might as well.
So the midbrain would encompass
the midbrain. I always think of it's like from the top of the pons to the top of the super colliculus and then the inferior colliculus, sort of like this space in here.
Okay, very small.
Yeah, very small. Yeah. And yeah, it's not, doesn't seem to be that well identified, more than it's a region, and then we have some structures in it. The pons is much more identified, and then the medulla is also difficult. Where does it start being the spinal cord or the medulla? It's like, we're not gonna be picky about that. It's just right here is the medulla, and I don't even know exactly where it changes.
Is there a reason for the color coding on that model? What's the blue versus the green versus the yellow?
On the model I'm pointing to now?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Where's the blue?
Oh, well, maybe it looks, for me, it looks blue.
Yeah, like, okay, so like this part or more this part?
Yeah.
That part? Mm-hmm. That part is the space. That's just dark.
Oh, but the blue, the blue around it, and then
this piece?
The midbrain blue, yeah.
This piece is the corpus callosum. And so, yeah, this is more whitish because it's more axons. So they kind of, this is more gray matter. On the brain, you have the gray matter on the outside, which is the cell bodies. Gray matter is cell bodies. And axons are white because of the myelin. And so that's sort of what they try to do is the color coding here. But that's, not really representative. And the cerebellum is a little darker when you look in the real cadaver. But it's not like this color.
Okay.
Yeah. Some of the brains, they actually even color code the lobes. But we don't use that for the test. That would be too easy, huh? Then this is from the outside. So you can see here it's the frontal lobe, and whenever you hit that, when you hit that red gyrus, which is indicated, this is supposed to be red, it's a little darker, then that's the precentral gyrus. And then the bluish one is the postcentral gyrus, and then behind here, this area is the parietal lobe. Behind here in the back is the occipital lobe. Underneath this groove here is this temporal lobe, or fissure, I should say. Sorry, fissure. Cerebellum again. And then here we got the olive. You can see the olive a little bit there. So that's supposed to be green. What else do we have on this? We don't see we see the insula on this picture. So this is, so you take one hemisphere, this is what we looked from the side before, so you could see more of that space, and that's the lateral ventricle, and coming all around here's lateral ventricle. And then this here's the thalamus. This is the basal ganglia. So that's why I took it out. People got too confused, although, I shouldn't do that, but it looks so similar. And so the thalamus is egg shaped, but it's sort of embedded in here. Then this is the pituitary gland again. And then look on this side, when you take the front part of this hemisphere off, you see how you got darker cells going into this area in here. And so that's the insula in here, actually. So this is the temporal lobe, and you pull that down, you have the insula behind it. So that's the only place I could see the insula. So if I label that, it will be there. And then since we're at it, we might as well go through the ventricular model here. So you have it's not, let me see if this is a better shot. I think this is a better shot. You could see the lateral ventricles here. There's one, and then there's the other one. So these are molds from the space. So these are not really in the body. The space is in the body on those sides of the brain, which is molded out so we can sort of see it on its own. And then here's the third ventricle, right in here between, and then the cerebral aqueduct, and then below here where it widens again, behind the lateral ventricle is the fourth ventricle. Good. With that, let's see if you guys have any questions. We can go to answer some of that, but we can also go to the spinal cord and keep us moving here. Just have to open that. And the spinal cord, we don't have too many. The terminology is pretty smooth on that. And when you look at the test review, that's the other thing that we need to look at, but we're going to pick that one up next week on the sensus organ. We don't discuss the spinal cord in terms of the physiology, because a lot of that is just pathways. It's just very interesting how it's organized, the spinal cord. But I think I have you guys mostly work through the quizzes on that, because it gets kind of, I don't know, to me it gets overwhelming with all the different names, even though the naming of spinal tracts is pretty good. But I just don't, I don't test on these things here, which one is which and so forth. There's just too many names. But when you look at the spinal cord, what's kind of cool about it is we mainly talk about tracks going up and down from the brain to the body, and then we have some reflex centers there. And so when we look at the spinal cord, we got all this white matter, that's tracks going up and down from the brain and to the brain. And then here we got this butterfly looking thing, and that's the gray matter. In the spinal cord, it's reversed. The gray's on the inside and the white's on the outside. Again, white matter is nerve tracks on axons and wires, telephone cables, and gray matter is cell bodies. So the reflex centers are in this gray area here. Like if you do your patella reflex, you hit the front of your knee, and the doctor doesn't, the leg swings up, that's located in this part of the lumbar spine. I actually had a patient, he was in his 50s, and I did that on him, and he looked at me and go like, you guys are really doing that? I thought I was only in the movies. And it was just too funny. And that's like, you never had that happen before. It was like, nope. And he was in his 50s already. He came after a car accident. So that was kind of like funny. But that's what happens in there is the reflex stuff. When we actually write here, let's just talk about this here. We have, do I have one that's labeled a little better? Yeah, so we have this one that we can look at the cross section of a cord. We have in the middle, there's a little canal, a little opening, that's the central canal. And then the front portion, and in neurology, somehow they don't say the anterior, they still use the old language. Their nerves don't fire that fast. The neurology nerves. But the front portion is a deep, deep groove. So it's the ventral median fissure. A fissure is a deep groove. A sulcus is a shallow indentation. And so in the back, we don't have that deep separating space going down, separating right from left. We just have a little sulcus. And so it's a dorsal. We have an anterior. Wait a minute. Oh, on the list, I put it as anterior groove. You see that here? So groove and the fissure here is the same vertebology.
I'm not sure that we're looking at the same thing that you are.
Oh, what are you looking at? Uh-oh. Thank you. As I keep talking and showing. Now you.
There it is. Yeah.
Thanks for speaking up. That took a little while. All right, so let's just go to the verbs and the words, and then we can pick it back up what I was talking before about. But the central canal is this little thing here, the center. Then in the front we have an anterior groove or a ventral median fissure. Again, terminology. I go for the modern terminology personally. That's why I put that on the list where I can find it. But I want you to be exposed to the other one too, so you have a reference point. because one of the things that I hated about the classes when I took at chiropractic school was like, and the deeper anatomy classes also, I was always these AKAs, these also knowns at, and I'm like, are these different structures or is that the same? And so when I made my booklets, I just wanted to put as many names as I could think of to, together as AKAs, so you don't have to have that anguish. And then the posterior median septum is here, septum, posterior median septum. So the terms come from here. That's the same as the posterior median sulcus. And then we look at the white, the gray structure, the butterfly looking structure. And we have these different bulges coming out. We have one that's in the back. That's the posterior horn. Where is that? The dorsal horn or posterior horn right here. And so this tells you what it is. This tells you what's in there. And so the posterior end of the spinal cord is sensory. So everything back here is sensory. And how you know if a spinal cord is sensory, you have this bulge here on a spinal on a spinal root, what comes right out of the spinal cord. You got this bulge, and this bulge is all the cell bodies of the nerves that bring information into the central nervous system. And so when you see this bulge, you know this is posterior, because you might not see this fissure here going all the way down sometimes. Might look similar to the other side, but when you see this bulge, you know you're in the backside of the spinal cord, and backside means sensory. And so the dorsal horn, the posterior horn, is a sensory, and I wrote it as posterior horn. See, again, the terminology is changing. We're trying to be more changing it to anterior and not ventral. This is old school terminology, but anyway, that's why I see both of them. And so then we have a lateral horn, which is here on the side, bulge out on the side. These are actually autonomic nervous system functions, like the thing that happens automatically in the body. Things like fight and flight and parasympathetic and sympathetic. And then we have a horn in the front, that's the ventral horn. The ventral horn is also always associated with motor nuclei, with motor functions. So this is where the impulses go out to the muscles or to the effectors or glands. Here is what comes in from the sensory receptors. So posterior sensory, anterior motor. And then as these little things come out in the back and in the front side of the spinal cord directly, they're called roots. They're not called spinal nerve yet. So the roots come out of the spinal cord, and they are either sensory back here or motor in the front. So the posteriors are sensory, the anteriors are motor. And then they join together and they become a spinal nerve. And then actually, let me put this picture up, because you have the roots here. This is the dorsal root ganglion. Oh, that's another one. That's that bulge is called the dorsal root ganglion. Let me show it here, dorsal root ganglion. So dorsal root ganglion is all the sensory nerve cell bodies. The ones for the motor are in the central nervous system, so you don't need them here. But anyway, that's what you can see here. So when those roots then come together, then we form a spinal nerve. And then we go and have offshoots to the back and to the front. And so the front becomes the anterior rami, and the back becomes the posterior rami. Look at that, I have that on there too. And so those are the internal makeup of the spinal cord there. And then the white matter, or everything around that gray matter, is tracts. That means stuff going up and down. So we got the blue stuff is the sensory tract. I like this picture a lot because it shows you what's in them, where things are coming from and going to. That's why I don't want you to study them. I want you to use this more as a reference. That's what I use this sometimes for, as a reference if I need to. What's interesting also is if you look at the names, you see a lot of the names have this coming from and going to in them. So the blue is upward sensory information. So the coming from the spine going to the cerebellum, those are right here. All right, so you can see that. spinal cerebellar. Coming from the spine going to the thalamus, those are right in here. And so, you know, in here we have a lot of the sensory, you know, touch, temperature, all that kind of stuff. Going from the spine to the olives, look at that. We got one like there. So it's like a puzzle. And then on this side, we have the red stuff. And the red stuff is motor. And we have the cortico-spinal, from the from to the to. The from is cortex. The precentral gyrus is the motor cortex, and it goes to the spine. So as you see, spine is the last word, you know it's a motor track. Rubrospinal, reticular, these are all places, nuclei in the brain, and they go all to the spine. So that's how they're organized and how they're labeling, their naming is organized. They're also orderly showing the mapping in the body. So you have, for example, no, I can't make it, but that's called somatotopy. So there's everything is nicely organized in the cervical, to the thoracic, to the lumbar, and sacral. And so it's somatotopy means this organization. But with that, the two pathways that I kind of like to understand most is the going down, the main going down is sort of that motor muscle stuff going down. And if you look at what nerves talk to, they talk to other nerves, to muscles, and to glands. And so actually most of what comes down from the brain is going to muscles. And so we have, when we look at that, we have a two-order neuron. That means we have two neurons from the precentral gyrus in the cerebral cortex to the muscle. Doesn't matter where in the body that muscle is. If that's a big toe muscle, it's the same thing. You have a neuron that goes all the way from the brain all the way to the lumbar spine level. And then from there, you have a synapse and a second order neuron that goes then to the muscle itself. And so what's kind of interesting is a lot of muscles work like in rhythmic fashion. So we're not really talking straight directly to the muscle from the top down. It's almost like a lot of them have a reflex rhythmic activity, and the upper central nervous system influences that. I know this is counter to what I just said all along here with these pathways, but it's really hard to understand all the levels of detail. But what's interesting was understanding that rhythmicity of the lower motor neuron. If somebody has a lesion, if somebody breaks something and it gets injured in the upper motor neuron, like somebody has a stroke or something, the lower motor neuron still functions. This reflex here still functions. And what happens reflexively is the modulation doesn't come from the central nervous system. And people who have that, potentially they contract the limbs really heavily, and they contract the flexors. Well, they try to contract both the flexors and the extensors, but the flexors are stronger than the extensors. So the biceps brachia muscle and the flexor carpal muscles, they contract. And this is the position these arms are pushed in. But it's almost like you're holding, if you do it consciously, you're holding it in that position and contract as much as you can. So you know how much it hurts. It's pretty, not pretty. And so, but when you see that presentation, you know the lower motor neuron is still intact. The upper motor neuron is not intact anymore. So that's known as a spastic paralysis, because they're in spasm. If they are just limp and nothing, the muscle don't work, the lower motor neuron is damaged, and it's known as flaccid paralysis. So that'd be like a badly herniated disc or something like that squeezes out into the nerve root. But I always think this is kind of interesting, this part. And then to finish up, we have, so the motor is 2 neurons and the sensor is 3 neurons. So sensations get picked up by a receptor. They go to the spinal cord, they go up to the brainstem, they synapse, well, actually spinal cord or brainstem, they synapse down in the lower part, and then from there they go as a secondary neuron to the thalamus. And that's when they synapse again in the thalamus to the cortex, then where we have consciousness of the impulse. Anyway, I think that's good enough for that. And then let's just go with the last few things here. We have a whole spinal cord. We look at the whole spinal cord here from the side. We have a couple of swellings. We have a swelling where the upper extremities happen. We have a little more activity in the lower extremities, and those are accommodated by what they call them enlargements, cervical and lumbar enlargements. And then we got, when we look at this picture from the back, we have that the spinal cord goes into a tip, and that tip is known as the conus medullaris. And then from there, we have nerves. The thing that happens is when the babies, when we're made, the nervous system doesn't grow as fast as the musculoskeletal system. And so the spinal cord sort of gets pulled upward over time, and some spinal nerves just go straight down until they exit the spinal cord from the levels where they originally exited from. When we were short. And so that collection of spinal nerves going down is known as the cauda equina, because it kind of looks like a horse's tail, and that's what cauda equina means. When you know, again, I'm sure a lot of wine and then a little dim light, and then they start cutting. It's like, look, how does that look? Let's describe it. That's the funny part of anatomy. And then there is one, and I don't have a visual of this. I think I don't tag it. You can kind of take it out on the test. I don't tag it, but I have it there because it's interesting. It's you have a little, actually what you have is you have pia mater, which is go right over as one of those protection layers over the spine and the brain. Pia mater comes together and forms a thin filament that goes from there, anchoring the spinal cord to the coccyx, right down there. That last thing is that, and so it makes sure the spinal cord is nice and staying in there and doesn't get pulled up or to the side too much. And that's known as the filum terminale. That's the last term there. In the real cadaver, it's a different reflection, so it's shiny. So it was very interesting when I was able to do that and see that once. I'm not an anatomist that does dissections, but I had a chance to do a little bit. Maybe coming back up again at some point. Anyway, okay, so with that, if you don't have more questions on it, if you do, speak up. If not, let's go back to the pictures here.
Will you be posting this Zoom recording? That way we can go back and watch it again later.
Yeah, and I think this time I'll record the Monday one because I usually record the Wednesday one because then I have a chance to do it once over. But I think we touched on a few important things that I want to put out. And so I'll record that. But let me go to the models. Yeah, and especially the model part. I want to make sure you guys... What? Where is my model? Uh-oh. That's not good. Oh, here. So this is the model that I use for the test. I do have another model. I gotta get back to you on that and look through the test. It's been a while since I looked through the test. I don't know if I actually use that model or not. But if I do, I'll show it on another class. We still have a little bit of time till the end. But this is the model of the spinal cord with a cross section. So what you see here is a vertebra. You see the posterior end is a cervical vertebra. You see how it's split back here. You see the body of the vertebra right here. Then these are the facet joints on the side. And so you see this nerve here coming in or going out, whatever you look at. And this is the spinal nerve. And then here you see a branch going to the back and one going outward a little more, and then it comes back in here. But this going to the back is the dorsal rami or posterior rami, and then this here is the anterior rami. The anterior rami is much bigger because the posterior one just goes and supplies the stuff in the back. I mean, not that that's not important, but it's just not as much stuff. And then we come to this side, and so you see this bulge here. That's the dorsal root ganglion. So you know this goes to the back, posterior. You also know this is posterior, but if you don't, then here are dorsal or posterior roots, and then they've entered the spinal cord back here. So this is the posterior horn. Then here's the lateral horn, and then here's the anterior horn, and then you see the nerves coming out in the front, or the anterior roots, or the ventral roots, anterior ventral roots. Good. And so what else we have in here? The central canal is this dark little spot. The anterior groove is this here. The posterior sulcus is this piece here. And I think that's pretty much for the most of it. And I don't have a cross section. I gotta take a note and find a picture of a cross section for next class. When COVID just happened, we went up to school and did these pictures in a hurry. So I kind of would do some of them a little bit different, of course, now. But anyway, that's good enough for now. So what, any questions at this point? If not, what we're going to do is we're going to take a little quiz. So I would like you to take out a sheet of paper, and going to do about 10 questions. And we can just start right here since we've done this. Huh? That way it's fresh in the head what's what. So question number 1, I would like for you to tell me what's this brown gray structure called here? Number 1. This structure here. Number 2, since we're going to stay on this one for a couple, what is this yellow bulge called? Yellow bulge, brown structure here. All right. And let's go to the brain. We can always go back if you guys need to see it again. Then number 3, I want you to tell me this structure in the back part, in the posterior part of the brain here. Number 3. Now, the cauliflower brain. Number 4, and if I go too fast, you block me, stop me, okay? Number 4 is this egg-shaped structure here that has all the information going through it that goes to the higher function part of the brain. So it's the steiencephalon structure right here. And then number 5, I like you to tell me this piece here, which is the connections from the right to the left hemisphere. Number 5, right, left hemisphere. Number 6, I like you to tell me what is the lobe, brain lobe called in the back of the brain, the backmost lobe in the brain. All right, number 8. Number 8. No, that's not the goal. That's better. What is this channel from this here down to this called, this piece? That's number 8.
What was 7?
Oh, that was 7. This is 7. Sorry about that. God, my brain's fried. I did 150 questions of anatomy questions. Woo! I'm a little loopy. So that's 7. I guess we got to find an 8. Well, these are parts too. Number 8. Stay on top of it. What is this cell called that has blue dots on it? The blue dots one is here. And that's number 8 and number 9. What is the valve called that's between this chamber and this chamber? So the 4-chamber to the main chamber entrance. What's that valve called? That's number 9. And number 10, as we come out of the aorta, what is the second stump called here that comes out of the aortic arch? Good. Let's solve it backwards since we have the pictures up. And I want to hear as many people shouting as possible. Number 10. Nobody?
Left subclavicle.
Almost?
Is it the left common carotid artery?
Yes, it's the left common carotid. The way I remember that is the right side just comes out as one and then it splits up. So we don't worry about that sort of brachiocephalic. But this one, the first one goes to the head and the second one goes to the arm. And so when you think of the, you know, how the body's laid out, the arm is more lateral than the head. And so that's how I remember that. Good job, though. And then number 9 is this valve. What's this valve?
Bicuspid
Yes. What's other name?
or
Generic name?
mitral?
Mitral is good. What's the generic name? Almost got them all.
Oh, intraventricular.
Yes, left atrioventricular valve. So on the list, you can write bicuspid, and that's very good. But you don't have to if you wondering where that came from. Atrioventricular valve is fine if right or left. I'm not going to worry about right or left. That's a little too picky, too nitpicky. Good job. And then number 8.
Is eosinophil?
No, that's these, the red ones,
Oh, confusing.
or orangey. The blue ones are?
Lymphocyte?
No, lymphocytes are these here with the marble background.
It's the basophil or
Oh,
It's
basil.
basophil. Yeah, it's basophil. So you got, if you look at the ones with the dots in the background, you got 3 of them with dots, 3 different colored dots. And we're looking at the color of the dots. So the ones the dot is the same as the background is neutrophil, the neutral background. The basophil is, to me, it's like, I don't know, base and blue goes together somehow. It's like acid and bases or so. And then the eosinophil I remember as being neon, so they're brighter. Anyway, that's how I remember. And then we got the monocytes, the big ones with the pink background, and the lymphocytes. And then the platelets here and the red blood cells. But that's all of them. There you go. And now we're going to have this model here. What's this connection channel called? That's number 7.
Ventricle, lateral ventricle.
Cerebral aqueduct. The lateral ventricle's up here.
Oh.
And then the connection is the 3rd ventricle where they come together, and then going down is the cerebral aqueduct filling into the 4th ventricle. All right. Well, no, it's good. I'm glad we're doing all these things because it's hard stuff. Don't be too hard on yourself. Just keep up a pace and do a little bit every day or so. What's this lobe called? Number 6.
Occipital lobe.
Occipital lobe. Good job. Occipital lobe. And then we have this white structure or this gray white structure here. Number 5.
Olfactory.
Corpus callosum. You got Yeah, good job, guys. And then what's this egg-shaped structure in here?
Thalamus.
Thalamus. Good. And the back brain?
Cerebellum.
Cerebellum.
Cerebellum. Very good. And here we go. What's that yellow bulge called here, number 2?
Dorsal root ganglion.
Dorsal
Dorsal
root
root
ganglia.
ganglion.
Very good, you guys. And then last but not least, this darker part here,
Dorsal horn.
posterior horn.
Okay.
So again, remember, good job. Remember, if it is on the side of the dorsal root ganglion, it's the posterior horn. It's the back side.
Will we get it correctly if we say dorsal or ventral?
Well, you can say posterior or dorsal and ventral or anterior, right?
Yeah, that's
Is
what I
it's-
mean. Yeah, because that's how
Yeah,
it's listed on the booklet. So
Yeah, you can interchange those terms, dorsal and ventral. I mean, dorsal and anterior, posterior, and ventral and anterior. You can interchange those terms unless it's very, very clear. But a lot of, as you see in neurology, a lot of the terms are used interchangeably depending on the textbook. It's kind of not fair, but then at the other side, it's also like there's so many people doing anatomy and stuff, so it's probably a little tall order to have uniformity, you know. So that's how I kind of look at it. But yeah, on the test, I'll take all of that stuff. All right. Good. With that, how are you guys doing? Any questions? No? Well, then let's take some roll. You guys, did this class help you, or is anybody fall asleep?
no.
No.
Yeah.
Wide
No,
awake.
I have no snoring background noise there somewhere, huh? All right, let's take some roll. Nairobi,
Here.
Emmanuel,
Yeah.
Scarlett,
Here.
Lashana,
I'm here.
I got Hemanot,
Here.
I got Anna,
Here.
I got Rosie,
Here.
I got Alejandra,
Here.
I got Viviana,
Here.
I got Narcy,
Here.
I got Sarah,
Here.
I got Lamo, I got a phone number. I got Paola. Okay, good. I saw you got unmuted, so I could talk. Lydia,
Here.
Adam,
Here.
and Edviges. Perfect.
Here.
Good job, you guys. So yeah, why don't I put this recording up right now, and then you have it for review, huh?
Thank you.
That'd be great.
Super. All right, and then I also gonna make I'm gonna try to make a PDF with these pictures so you can download that too to study for the final.
Oh, they're not up yet for review.
No, I didn't have one of those made.
Okay. Yeah,
Did
please.
the muscle help to
Yeah.
have that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll make that in the next couple days.
Cool.
That way. Okay. Cool. All right. If there's nothing left, I wish you guys a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Reach out if you have any questions. Thank you. Text me if anything comes up. Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Have a nice rest of the week.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.